Every year, as exam season approaches, I pose the dangerous question that is, which bit of bio confuses you the most? I really don't know why I ask. It's genetics, always genetics, sometimes a nitrogen cycle and an occasional kidney, but basically genetics. So here we go, the SRL Bio Guide to Fundamental GCSE Genetics. Let's do it. Okay, let's start with the setup. All of your cells, with a couple of exceptions, are known as diploid. That means they have 2 of each chromosome, one from your mum and one from your dad. Since there are 23 different chromosomes, that's chromosomes 1 to 22, and a pair of sex chromosomes, XX for females, XY for males, that means you have 46 chromosomes in total. It also means you have 2 copies of each gene, one that you get from your mum and one you get from your dad. And since these can be different versions of the same gene, we call them alleles. So there are different alleles, different versions of the same gene flying around in our population. But these alleles were not created equally and will show up in the phenotype, that's the observable characteristics of an organism, under different criteria. Essentially, most alleles are one of 2, either dominant or recessive. Dominant alleles will show up in the phenotype even if you've only got 1 copy of it from 1 parent, and we use a capital letter to represent that. Let's use brown eyes as our example. Okay, now I can't in all good faith just start throwing eye colour around as a simple example here. In reality, there's probably over 60 genes that control your eye colour, but for the purposes of this example, it's basically true to say that brown eyes are dominant over blue. Onwards. What that means is if you get a brown eye allele from either of your parents, your eyes will be brown. Blue eyes, on the other hand, are recessive. That means you need 2 copies of that allele for it to show up in your phenotype, and we'll represent that with a lowercase letter. So the only way to have blue eyes is to inherit a blue eye allele from both parents. All of that leaves 3 possible genotypes. That's the combination of alleles that you have. You can have 2 of the same allele, which we'll call homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive, depending on which one you have, or you can be heterozygous. That is, you have 2 different alleles, but you'll only show the dominant one in your phenotype. And when you go on to produce gametes through meiosis, you'll split these alleles up so that you pass on 1 to each of your offspring. So what happens when you have children? Well, congratulations. Let's assume that both you and your lucky partner are heterozygous for your eye colour. So you both have brown eyes because that allele is dominant, but you also carry the blue eye allele. We can represent this happy union in a diagram called a Punnett square, where we'll put your genotype along the top and your serendipitous spouses along the side. Since your offspring will inherit 1 allele from each of you at random, the 4 outcomes here are equally probable. So we can see that each child has a 3 in 4 chance of inheriting brown eyes and a 1 in 4 chance of inheriting blue. Lovely stuff, but what happens when there are 2 alleles that can't decide which should be dominant? Well, if they were humans, they'd probably fight to the death, but alleles, being sweet little pacifist angels, share. Now, to show you this, I'm going to use a trait in myself, and as a reward for sticking with me so far, you get to watch me wound myself in the name of science. Let's go get some fun. So we're going to test my blood type. Now you've probably heard of blood types, you'll hear them quoted as A positive, O negative, etc. And it's quite a simple system. There are 3 alleles, A, B and O. A and B are both dominant over O, so you need 2 O alleles to have type O blood. An A and an O will give you type A and so on. And I can test for type A using the type A serum, which will make the type A blood cells stick together and go clumpy. Same thing for type B with the other one. But to do that, I need some blood. So, as you can see from the blood test, I'm positive for type A and type B, and that's because those 2 alleles are what's called co-dominant. I got an A from my mum and a B from my dad, and because they're co-dominant, they both show up in my phenotype, and I have type AB blood. So there you have it. There's genetic inheritance in a nutshell. There are caveats to all this, of course. The vast majority of traits are controlled by multiple genes for a start. We call those traits polygenic, and you tend to get more continuous variation with them. Most genes also have more than 2 alleles in a population rather than just brown and blue eyes. In fact, it's those 2 reasons why we see exam questions using weird and wonderful traits like phenylketonuria, which is 1 in 100,000 genetic disorder, rather than simple traits you can easily observe. That's all for this whistle-stop tour. Give us a like and subscribe if you're into that sort of thing, and we'll see you next time.